These theorists, you may read about them, British, Italian, and American, talked about what the lessons were of this experience. And it colored not only operations in the interwar period, but how we thought about nuclear weapons and city busting in the Second World War. Essentially, they said, look, we need to go to the heartland. And they said, well, you read their books, and I have. They talk about army formations, military-industrial targets, fleets, political centers. All that sounds pretty good, you know. If you hit that, well, the will to persist should be broken, and we do not have to bleed to death on the front lines and trenches. However, it's a little confused as to whether they're trying to go after hard, specific military targets or area bombing. They just kind of put it all together. You'll notice that Billy Mitchell, although he flies a plane to show that he can destroy a battleship or a big cruiser, also talks about, well, what we really need is chemical bombing of city centers. Churchill gets very enamored of making the League of Nations have a fleet of bombers that will chemically wipe out the center of a city to keep everybody from wanting to go to war. So there's a lot going on here with regard to vagueness between military precision and terror bombing. Yeah, was there a question? No? Okay. Now, there was some experience, but it also kind of was a set of incomplete experiences. The British had colonies, and they went patrolling with their planes. And you'll notice, in this case, there's a little bit of an asymmetry between the airplane and the camels there. And you'll notice that in each picture, there are no clouds. Has anyone been to Great Britain? Was it sunny? Has anyone been to Germany? Was it sunny? Oh, it wasn't. We'll get back to that. So it seemed like this was a great weapon. When the other fellow didn't have it, it was clear, and essentially they were 150 years behind you militarily and technology. It seemed like a winning weapon. Now the Italians tried using chemical weapons in the Ethiopian War, and what they learned is it wasn't worth the candle. It's kind of interesting. They meant to do the wrong thing, but they couldn't help themselves. So, not bad outcome. They discovered that high explosives were deadly enough. And so one of the takeaways during this period was, maybe you don't need to do chemical bombing of city centers. However, it's interesting that that was a preoccupation, that in 1925 and 32, protocols against chemical and biological weapons were pushed. In 32, America tried to prevent or get agreement to prevent chemical warfare and bombers. So it still was in the background of everyone's thinking because chemical weapons were used on the front lines in World War I. People like Hitler and Churchill were exposed to that. Kind of interesting. When was the last time we had presidents that were exposed to warfare? That's a question. Does anybody know? Bush 41. That's right. So it's been a couple of weeks. All right. By the way, I was in that administration. I know how long ago that was. Jesus, that's a quarter century ago. All right. Here's another experience. 3/4 of the city knocked out, 300 roughly dead. This is Guernica. There's a lot of dispute if, even now, and certainly then, as to whether this was intentionally meant to target innocents. The number 300 is certainly large by any standard, but it's certainly relatively, as we'll soon learn, really small. What's interesting is nobody wanted to take credit for this one. So, you know, does it count in the sense of a military scientific operation? Not clear. This one, a little different. Japanese military command consciously used incendiaries. Does anybody know what an incendiary is? A fire, something that, a bomb that is meant to create fires, burn things down. They used those on a city center with the aim of killing Chinese. And the numbers there were not 300. They were 5,000 in 2 days. This actually, I think, is our first clear example. I have not been much of a student of history of the war in the Pacific. We'll keep coming back to this. Whatever I'm most interested in and ignorant of, you get to hear about more. There's a book by a guy named Max Hastings called Retribution. If you got time, read it. Boy, will that widen your eyes. You'll understand more about East Asia and what we're up against there now by reading that than you will by reading 20 years of newspaper articles about East Asia. If you think you know what happened in the Second World War, read that book. This is one of the things that it talks about.